Hi, it's Sunday, August 11th. We're tracking a new tropical wave tracking through the central Atlantic. This has been labeled Invest 98L by the National Hurricane Center. It will be moving towards the Leeward Islands, arriving sometime Tuesday morning, is the average expectation right now. This is not yet getting close to being a tropical storm. It is still broad. It's a wave pocket without a well-defined surface circulation. Not a lot of thunderstorm activity with it. That's been a little bit of a struggle over the last day or so with only sporadic popcorn, patchy convection, fragmented, indicating that this is not rapidly developing, which is good news for the Lesser Antilles. If we take a short or a zoomed in look at the visible satellite imagery here, this is still very much in the early stages of development. It might be difficult to see, but most of these clouds at most levels are racing from east to west. The system is going to be moving at beyond 20 miles per hour forward speed towards the west, so it's racing right to left on your screen. At the surface, there is some nearly calm or possibly southwest wind right there, and all the surface easterlies are on the northern side. So there is a vorticity maximum trying to develop in here, but you see a lot of these mid-level clouds and upper-level clouds racing off to the west of that. A lot of the mid-level wind is directly east to west above the low-level vorticity maximum. Basically, this indicates that there isn't that much mid-level rotation going on yet. There is not much vertical depth to this system, which continues to indicate that it is still very early days in its development. Now, all that said, conditions are going to improve for 98L as it approaches the Leeward Islands, and we would expect a tropical storm to develop at some point when it's in this zone. Three different things are going to contribute to its chances of development. One is time. This wave pocket requires time for convection to build vertical depth of this vorticity maximum that's trying to close off a circulation. It's moving quickly towards the west, so it's a little difficult to get surface westerlies going relative to the Earth's surface, but given enough time, this wave pocket will moisten and deepen and will eventually form a closed area of low pressure. The second thing is the upper level environment. If we look at the GFS 200 millibar flow, we'll see where 98L is centered now. There's uniform easterly flow essentially where the system currently is. That's not excellent in terms of upper level divergence. Right now, there's not much of a strong equatorward divergent outflow channel and not much of a poleward outflow channel either. It's essentially uniform straight line flow, so not particularly excellent. As it heads westward, however, what we'll see is it nears the Leeward Islands. It starts to interact with this little tut-like trough to its north, developing a poleward flow channel out on the poleward side, and then much better divergent flow towards the equatorward side. This overall flow becomes much more divergent, which means air is spreading out from the center of the circulation aloft, and this promotes more sustained and deep thunderstorm activity, which will contribute to the storm's development. The third thing is the sea surface temperature background. So right now the storm is located somewhere in here, and it's been tracking over this 27.5 degree water, which is warm enough to support a tropical system, but it gets significantly warmer over here as the storm approaches the Leeward Islands. Could be as much as 2 full degrees Celsius warmer than what the disturbance is over now. That is a very significant difference, and it will absolutely matter, and the system will be generating much more thunderstorm activity by the time it gets over this 29 and 30 degrees Celsius water near the Leeward Islands. As a result, on the modeling, we can see pretty good agreement for days now on the following evolution. This broad, moist wave pocket begins to moisten further, and eventually a closed circulation does form by the time the storm nears the Leeward Islands. Again, Tuesday morning to Tuesday afternoon is currently the expectation. GFS is a little bit on the slower side because it develops the storm a little quicker. So by Tuesday afternoon and evening, it's passing through the northern leewards and then beginning to turn more towards the northwest as it moves near the Virgin Islands by Wednesday morning, and this would be a tropical storm strength system on the model. The European model has a similar evolution but slower to develop, which is not at all a surprise. This is the least aggressive model in most situations. It shows a tropical depression strength system in the same position as the GFS, and it's about 12 hours earlier on arrival to the islands. Seems unlikely at this point that it would still be this week by the time it gets there. I would bet more on a tropical storm than tropical depression, but we will see. One of the difficult aspects of this forecast is if you're in the Leeward Islands, right now you're feeling good that it's not yet developing with pace, but it could be developing right at the last minute here, and so it's a little unclear what the exact intensity of the storm would be in terms of wind and surf generation. Certainly rain coming, but in terms of wind impacts, the farther west you are, the greater the risk of high wind hazards. So something to keep in mind, a little bit of uncertainty here on exactly how far along in development the storm will be. If it were to become a tropical storm in this area, its name would be Ernesto. And one thing to note as well on the track is that since the storm isn't yet developed and we have this broad wave pocket that has not yet consolidated, that adds a little bit of track uncertainty as well. So while we have agreement on the storm generally moving through the Leeward Islands, exactly which islands could experience the high wind hazards as the center moves by, still a little uncertain as well. Right now, the consensus is for this to move through the Virgin Islands and just northeast of Puerto Rico, but we have been seeing trends, and this has been moving around. If you look at the GFS over the last couple of runs, it has really shifted northeastward. It used to be south of Puerto Rico as a stronger storm. It has now shifted considerably towards the right. And so you can see that if you're in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, still some movement going on in the forecast. A lot of that depends on exactly when and how much 98L consolidates, and there's certainly no guarantees that any particular islands here will receive or avoid the core of whatever tropical storm does form over the next couple of days. Now, as we start talking about the track beyond the Leeward Islands, we're probably talking about a recurve towards the north here. This is the GFS ensemble, 500 millibar height and anomaly for Wednesday morning. This is where the storm would be near the Virgin Islands on the ensemble mean. And you'll notice that there's a pretty weak ridge to its north here. There's ridges over the northern Gulf of Mexico and the eastern Atlantic, but there's this pretty broad-based long wave trough to its north. And there's all this ridging over Hudson Bay that's inducing an anticyclonic wave break that is really maintaining this trough over the western Atlantic for a couple of days in a row. And for that reason, this ridge is very weak. This trough does not go anywhere fast. It's not exiting quickly towards the east. And so it just opens the lane for this storm to turn towards the north. And really the only way for this to not turn north is if it were much farther south than expected and weaker, so that it could somehow get underneath of this ridge. But that would require it likely tracking south of the Greater Antilles. This is typically a pattern that induces a pretty clear-cut turn toward the north, and that has become more clear over the last couple of days as the trend in this forecast has been one of showing deepening of this trough. These blue colors mean that this trough has gotten stronger in the last 48 hours of model runs on the GFS ensemble, and this is true of the European model as well. This is a split jet flow. We have a strong jet over the northern Atlantic like this, and then the southern branch is here, and it's meandering because of this kind of blocking ridge in between, and this is not going anywhere quickly. So it's staying in the western Atlantic for multiple days in a row, which easily turns this toward the north. Now, of course, at this point, there would be concerns about potentially Bermuda, as most model tracks do show this turning towards the north here in the following way, moving through the Leeward Islands, close to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and then moving up right toward where Bermuda is located. Of course, it's an island, it's a small target, that means it's fortunately easy to miss, but in general, models are headed that general direction, and it's going to take 6 or 7 days to get there, but something to keep in mind if you're in Bermuda, keep an eye on this forecast as the storm likely develops and heads your way. Conditions would likely be favorable for a hurricane to develop as it makes this turn toward the north, as intensification would likely be expected in that case. If you're in Hispaniola, the track has been shifting a little bit toward your east over the last day or two, which is certainly good news, but can't guarantee that it won't shift back, especially if the storm is a little bit weaker here than anticipated, maybe more like the European model. We might see a slight shift back toward the west and greater rainfall, heavy rainfall and flooding chances in both the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, so keep your eyes out for that. But we might start seeing tropical storm watches in some of the Leeward Islands pretty soon here over the next 24 hours from the National Hurricane Center, if the tropical storm is indeed about to form. That's about it for this video. We'll watch 98L on its approach, likely to become a storm either before or during its passage through the Leeward Islands, and possibly getting close to Puerto Rico as well. So everyone be prepared and stay safe this week. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.